When you think of lockdown closers in 2022, most people probably jump to Edwin Diaz of the New York Mets, and this is for good reason. In 2022, Diaz has been lights out. He has an ERA below 1.5, has saved 30 games, has a fielding independent pitching of around 1, he's allowing less than a runner on per inning, is averaging 17 strikeouts per 9 innings. I mean, when you hear those trumpets come the 9th inning, the game is over. That's basically where it's gotten to. He's that good. With that all being said, is he the most valuable and important closer in baseball this year? Surprisingly, it's up for debate. The New York Mets have been great this year. The division is still in question, but what isn't a question is if they will be playing in October or not. They've been firing on all cylinders this season, and having a reliable lockdown closer like Diaz is a big reason as to why they are at where they're at. But again, although he has arguably been the best and most valuable at the back end of any bullpen, there is a debate to be had. Ryan Helsley of the St. Louis Cardinals has been nothing short of incredible this year. So has Evan Phillips of the Dodgers, who has come out of absolutely nowhere this season to be dominant, but to truly find the biggest competition as far as best closer in baseball goes, we have to go to the American League. The New York Yankees had the best closer at one point in Clay Holmes, who had a 1.31 ERA in the first half, but has pitched to an ERA over 5.5 in the second half, so it's not him. The Houston Astros have been the best team in the American League this year with a really solid back end of their bullpen, but you're not going to find Diaz's equal there either. In order to do so, you gotta go to Cleveland, where you will find the Guardians. If you haven't kept up much with the Cleveland Guardians this year, I don't really blame you. They're in the weakest division in baseball, have no players that notable other than Jose Ramirez compared to other teams, and haven't been that dominant all year. When you think of American League threats, you think of the Astros, you think of the Yankees, you think of the Blue Jays and Rays, but not necessarily the Guardians, and that's okay. But if there's one thing I can say about this team, is that although they may not be as sexy as some of these other American League playoff teams, don't sleep on them. And a big reason as to why you shouldn't sleep on the Cleveland Guardians? Their closer, Emmanuel Clase. The Guardians currently have the least amount of wins out of any American League playoff team. In fact, the New York Mets have about 15 more wins than they do. But is that because the Mets have Diaz rather than Clase? No, it's because the Mets have more star power than Cleveland. As far as the offense goes, the Mets have Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor, Starling Marte, and Jeff McNeil. As for the pitching, they don't have one bad starter in that rotation. Chris Bassett has been solid, so has Taijuan Walker, Carlos Carrasco, and David Peterson have done their jobs, and then you of course have Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom, two guys who have had injuries surrounding them this year, but when healthy is the best 1-2 punch in the game, and the bullpen, of course led by Diaz, has been great. A lot of money has been invested into this Mets team, and you have to applaud them for it. Owner Steve Cohen is no cheapie and will spend whatever it takes to get his Mets to October. The Mets' 2022 payroll comes in second after the Dodgers at just under $263 million. As for Cleveland, it's an entirely different story. The Cleveland Guardians are not nearly as loaded as the Mets. The offense is led by Jose Ramirez, one of the best third basemen in the game, and as far as bigger names go, that's about it. Second baseman Andres Gimenez has been great, but other than that, the Guardians aren't a team that's going to outslug you. They have several above-average productive hitters like Josh Naylor, Steven Kwan, Oscar Gonzalez, and then the average hitting shortstop Ahmed Rosario. The pitching has been solid, with Shane Bieber continuing to be one of the best American League starters. Tristan McKenzie's been great, Cal Quantrill's been solid, but it's not quite as strong a rotation as the Mets have. As far as the money side goes, Guardians ownership does not operate quite like the Mets one does. The only reason they still have Jose Ramirez on their team is because he decided to take less money to stay in Cleveland, openly admitting that he could have gotten more money elsewhere but chose to be loyal. As far as the rest of the team, it's nothing compared to the Mets. Like I said, the New York Mets have the second highest payroll in baseball at just under $263 million going into their 2022 roster. The Cleveland Guardians have the fourth lowest payroll in baseball at just under $58 million. So to put that more in perspective, the Mets are spending about $205 million more than the Guardians. This also has to do with the closers. Edwin Diaz has obviously been worth every cent of what he's getting paid in 2022, but again, is he more valuable than Cleveland's closer Emmanuel Clase? This doesn't really have anything to do with the argument, but Diaz is getting paid way more than Clase. Diaz's 2022 salary is a little over $10 million, while Clase is getting paid a little less than $2 million. Again, doesn't factor into the argument I'm making, but I just find that intriguing how different the money is, but similar the talent, even though Diaz has been in the league longer. So between Diaz and Clase, who's been more valuable? I think Clase. Now, when I say that Emmanuel Clase has been more valuable than Edwin Diaz this year, that doesn't mean that I think he's necessarily better than Diaz. I think they actually have been almost identical as far as who's better. So I don't know if you can objectively choose one over the other. My argument is that I think Emmanuel Clase has been more important to the Guardians than Edwin Diaz has been to the Mets. In other words, the Guardians have needed Clase more than the Mets have needed Diaz. The Mets, as I already explained, have a much better team overall and on paper than the Guardians do. They are more of an offensive threat, have more weapons pitching-wise, and have more money being invested into the roster as a whole. As a result, they have way more wins than Cleveland. If you want to compare the two elite closers side by stats, they're very even. Clase and Diaz have both allowed the same amount of earned runs. Clase's ERA is better, Diaz's fielding independent pitching is better, and Diaz has also struck out over 40 more hitters than Clase has. As far as wins above replacement goes, which basically tells you how many wins the player has been worth, Diaz and Clase are deadlocked at Baseball Reference wins above replacement at 2.9. In other words, you can flip a coin and whoever you land, you should be happy with. Obviously, the sexier pick is Edwin Diaz because he has more strikeouts, is on a much better team, and has a now really popular walkout entrance. But has he meant more for the Mets than Clase has for the Guardians? I'd argue no. Edwin Diaz has saved 30 games for the Mets this year. Now take away Diaz from the Mets in 2022. Would they have less wins than they currently do? Most definitely. Emmanuel Clase has 36 saves for the Guardians this year. Now take him away from Cleveland in 2022. Would they have less wins? Most definitely. But here's the thing. The Mets have more resources to the point where although they wouldn't be as successful without Diaz, they'd still be okay. It wouldn't break them. As for the Guardians, you can easily argue that they're not a playoff team without Emmanuel Clase. So again, as even as they both have been this year, with Diaz arguably more dominant, Clase is more important to the Guardians' success than Diaz is to the Mets' success. Let me know what you think, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.